What up? Welcome to Homegrown Hustle, where local brilliance takes the center stage. I'm your host, Matt Eichmann. Together, we're about to embark on an inspiring journey. Our community thrives on the wisdom of insightful leaders that are right here in our backyard. And we're bringing their expertise to your ears. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur or simply seeking inspiration, this podcast is your guide. Join us every week in celebrating innovation, guidance, and the power to inspire greatness. Let's explore the stories that shape our local business landscape, and together, let's ignite the spark of excellence. Good morning. Welcome to the Homegrown Hustle podcast. My name's Matt Eichmann, your host. I'm here with Scott Welly, the #1 best-selling actor, speaker, and performance coach dedicated to helping you outperform the norm. Homegrown Minnesotan, and we're just grateful to have you on here this morning. How you doing, Scott?
I'm doing great, Matt. How are you?
I am fantastic. So I just want to get into it and start off with a little bit of your backstory. For those who don't know you, Scott, I want to give you the opportunity to kind of introduce yourself a little bit.
Sure. I'm a native Minnesotan, originally born and raised in Albany, Minnesota. I know you've got a lot of local listeners, so some of them might be familiar with Albany. For those that are not, it is about 20 miles northwest of St. Cloud, small town. About 1,500 people when I grew up there. I think it's up over 2,000 now, but yeah, it was a small town Minnesotan, loved growing up in small town, was only really interested in a couple of things growing up, was interested in sports, and was also very interested in psychology, and ended up going on, getting my undergraduate degree from University of Wisconsin-Madison. Don't hold that against me if you are a native Minnesotan and if you're a Gopher fan, but got my undergraduate degree from Wisconsin. And it was at that time when I was getting my undergraduate in psychology that I was really trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And sports psychology as a profession at that time was really kind of coming to the forefront and was becoming more visible. And I decided to go on and get my master's degree in sports psychology. If you don't know what it is, it's a psychology of working with elite level, professional level athletes on the mental game of what it takes to be able to train and compete at that highest level. And your listeners might think, well, I'm just trying to grow my business, scale my business, kind of, et cetera. What does that have to do with me? What you actually come to realize is a lot of the same skills and principles that high-level athletes go through are the same things that will allow us to win on the field of play of life as well as the field of play of business. So I don't really work with many athletes anymore. The majority of what I do is, for lack of a better term, motivational speaking, as well as I have a few business leaders, C-suite executives, sales leaders, entrepreneurs that I do personal performance coaching with, just on some of the distinguishing characteristics of what allows people to outperform the norm. And that's how I got to where I am today. That's the condensed version.
All right. Well, we're going to expand on that a little bit here as we get going. But so you grew up in Minnesota and then you went to Madison, really branched out there, and you're studying psychology. So tell me a little bit about that transition from just psychology to sports psychology. I take it you were an athlete yourself. Were you a college athlete?
I played golf in college. Yep.
Okay. I played college baseball, so I really can connect there. I was a pitcher, and understanding like the game between your ears and being able to win that game in order to execute on the field. I'm super interested in this conversation here. So, and in golf, I would assume it's kind of similar, right? It's like you're out there and you're kind of by yourself, right? It's not really that much of a team sport when you're playing.
Oh, it's a completely individual sport. And, you know, I'm probably horribly biased when I say this, but I really truly believe that golf is the most mentally taxing and difficult sport out there. Just for the simple reason that, like, if you're playing college baseball, okay, I know that you're kind of coming maybe from a standstill in between pitches and stuff, but really there can be a little bit more of act and react, I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
in baseball, basketball, football, soccer, some of the mainstream sports. But golf, you're sitting there for 70, 75, 80 shots starting from a static position every time and thinking about, what did I just do? What am I going to do? What am I doing now? Something completely irrelevant. It just makes it a really mentally daunting game. And it is truly a game of, you got to be able to master what's going on between the ears if you want to be able to play it
Mm-hmm.
well. So yeah, a lot of me getting into sports psychology was really just looking at, I mean, how can I be less of a head case myself? And like, how can I help my own performance? Never really knowing this might be something that I could potentially use to be able to help a lot more people.
Well, if you golfed in college, you golfed at a really high level. Are you still golfing?
There's only so many hours in a day. So honestly, between traveling for, for speaking engagements and just vacationing and trying to have a life, and I've kind of gotten into marathons and triathlons and things like that, like I just only have so much time. So I probably don't play any more than a handful of times a year now.
Well, you don't
yeah.
kind of get into marathons. You're either I feel like that's like you're doing this or you're not really doing this, but I totally understand. So was your interest in psychology as your undergrad, was that because of the sports and how you were performing, or was there like a family member that was involved in that?
No, when I first chose psychology at Wisconsin, really it was just by default, where it was probably end of my sophomore year, and I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do with my life and where I wanted to go. And it was one of those towards the tail end, I think, of sophomore year. I hadn't declared a major, and at some point, like, you got to pick a path, you got to choose what path am I going to go down, and that was where I came back to what was something that I actually found interesting in high school. And it was just a very simple, basic psychology class that I took at Albany High School, and thinking, oh, that's kind of interesting. Why do we think what we think, feel what we feel, do what we do? So really, for lack of a better term, and by default, I just decided, okay, I'll make psychology my major. And then it kind of got a little bit more targeted towards then sports psychology, because I mean, when I was graduated from Wisconsin with a BA in psychology, all right, what are you going to do with that? There aren't a lot of career paths necessarily just with that major. So I had to look at, what are you going to do? And then that's where I really thought about, well, you're interested in sports, you're interested in psychology. And it was at that time, kind of, 2001, 2002, that sports psychology was coming more to the forefront. Before that, I feel like there was a little bit of a stigma behind it, where if you're a high-level baseball player, a high-level golfer, you're working with a sports psychologist, like, there must be something wrong with you, right? Like, you must really be messed up.
You have to be a head case.
Weird. Yeah. And it was at that time that it was really kind of looking at, people were getting sports psychologists more not to cure some underlying deficiency or disorder, but because they knew that they could enhance their performance on the court or the course of the field or the ice by owning what's going on in between their ears. So that's a little bit of how I got into it.
So then sports psychology into the business world. I mean, I've heard a lot of conversation about how that translates. I see it myself, being an athlete all the way through college, and seeing how some of those tendencies or habits that you have to be successful in sports can translate into the business world. So tell me a little bit about like what that transition was like, kind of what you were thinking about.
Yeah. I mean, I always just say sports psychology is just like life psychology. It's just more specialized towards athletes. And I didn't know this at the time when I started doing sports psychology, but just became more and more apparent to me right after I got my master's degree. I was working with athletes on a bunch of different levels, but it became more apparent to me just with like everyday people that I would speak with, whether it was friends or whether it was people that were just trying to climb the corporate ladder, were trying to start their own business, it really became clear to me that so many of the skills and principles that athletes use to be able to dominate their field of play are the same things that will allow people to just dominate or be their best on the field of play of life as well as business. So, I mean, just things like, we were talking off mic before we started here on being busy versus being productive. It's how are you actually allocating your time and energy every day? And are you focusing and practicing intently, so to speak? Are you focusing on things that move the needle so you're getting maximum results for your time and energy invested in something? We all know that we need to be gritty. Anybody that has ever tried to grow a business knows that if you get knocked down, you have to be able to get back up. We know that we have to be able to set and achieve our goals. We know that we have to be able to generate confidence when we need it. Like a lot of those things that athletes go through are the same things that will allow us to be our best.
And being able to handle failure and micro failure, and all the different things that come along with just like that consistent effort. So tell me, like, what are the main things when you come in and you're working with a business owner? It sounds like you're doing one-on-one coaching in certain scenarios. Like, what are the things that you consistently have to work on, and maybe some pointers or recommendations for any listeners to try to help move the needle in their business as they're trying to grow?
Well, I literally just had a Zoom call right before we hit record and we started doing this. And the one universal thing that I hear from every person that's bringing me in to speak or coach or consult with their organization, their team, or their business is something to the effect of, we're going through a lot of change right now, and some of our people are kind of struggling to deal with it. And I guess I'll lump all things kind of into change and adversity and crisis and pressure and headwinds and different things like that. Everybody is experiencing it. And this can be a very simple thing of, how do you look at that? How do you perceive it? And instead of what I feel like the norm does, where you just try to wish it away and you just say, well, I hope that I can live my life in this perfectly kind of comfortable area where maybe nothing is changing and everything is predictable. Instead of having that mentality or that outlook on things, let's actually think about how we can lean into some of the changes that are going on, how we can put our best foot forward, how can we see the opportunity that may exist in what's going on, and be able to actually adapt and thrive in those circumstances. Because you'll get this. I mean, anybody can play a good baseball game when they're well rested and focused, and it's 75 degrees and sunny, and like you're seeing the ball well and you're fielding well and everything else. Like anybody can do that. But I think the true mark of an outperformer and someone that achieves greatness and performs at a high level is how they actually perform when the deck is stacked against them, when things aren't perfect and things aren't going their way. So that would that's just one example, but that is literally one universal thing that I hear that I try to work with people on, is instead of just wishing this away, let's actually accept it. Let's kind of bolster our own character and intestinal fortitude to be able to move past it and really think about how can we adapt and thrive through this change, pressure, stress, adversity, etc.
So what are some of the conversations that you have with somebody that you're trying to help convert that mindset into something that serves them and what they're trying to do with their vision?
Well, there is no one size fits all, because it's heavily dependent on the context and the changes that someone's going through. Like, are these changes that are completely outside of their control? Are these changes that they maybe have partial influence or are partially in control of? Because a lot of that, I think, matters with how you can kind of adapt and thrive through it and what you can do about it. But just a lot of a lot of probably the starting point, I feel like, to winning the mental game of sports or business or life is just basic self-awareness. And I try to get people in tune with this. It would sort of be like one of my favorite things about watching sports these days is when I see athletes mic'd up, like mic'd up in the heat of competition. Like if I'm watching a Twins game, I love it when I get to hear Byron Buxton, what he's saying to teammates, or what he's saying to Rocco Baldelli, or what he's saying to competitors, kind of, et cetera. I love when you get to hear athletes mic'd up. And I always just say, if we were to mic you up each and every day, as far as what you say to yourself about you, about others, about the world, about your business, what would we hear? And oftentimes the stuff that we tell ourselves is nothing that we would ever tell a customer or a client or a son or a daughter or a team member or anything else. And I think having that self-awareness of what is the internal dialogue and the self-talk, the story that I'm actually telling myself, once you have self-awareness into that story, now you can actually take action steps to be able to make some changes.
Because you know where you're currently at, and that awareness allows you to understand starting point. And if you can clearly identify destination, then you just fill in the gap.
Yeah, it's like a baseline. What's my baseline? Okay, if I want to improve as a hitter in baseball, well, I got to know where I'm starting. Like, what's my current batting average? So, I mean, it's basically the same thing. Where am I starting at from a self-talk perspective? And then once you recognize that, now you can actually do something about it.
Okay. So, on top of the sports psychology and all that, you're a top selling author. You've got, I believe it's 9 books, right?
10.
Were you
actually
always into writing, or was that part of what your business kind of started with, or how does that all tie in?
Yeah, I mean, I actually started out more as a writer than I did as a speaker.
Okay.
My story around speaking is that people listening to this probably wouldn't believe it, but I mean, anybody that went to school with me early on doesn't believe that I'm a speaker now, because I was actually painfully shy growing up and had a terrible stutter all the way through grade school, spent years in speech therapy. I was a kid that would sit in the back of the classroom, teacher would ask a question, I'd put my head down because I didn't want him or her to call on me. So anytime I would have to speak in front of a group or speak in front of a class was just absolutely terrifying for me. So I actually started out, once I kind of branched out on my entrepreneurial journey, I just started out writing. And of course, there were some limitations to get over in regards to that. Like, nobody knows who the heck I am. I don't have a huge audience. Who's going to want to read my book? Some of the self-limiting beliefs that we all have, right? But once I started to get over some of those and just think about, what, every author had to start with their first word on their first page of their first book. Like, just put it out there. What's the worst that can happen? And once I put a couple of books out there and people started reading them, and I got asked a couple of times, hey, will you come in and speak for this group? And I said, sure, and went and did it, and really felt great, not just, I think, financial paycheck, certainly, from doing it, because I was doing a lot of free speaking engagements early on and was barely paying the bills. So it wasn't really about a financial paycheck, but it was really about the mental and the emotional paycheck that I really felt like I got from speaking. It was just a tremendous sense of, wow, you can really impact a lot of people in a very short period of time if you're going and speaking to an audience. And it was at that point that I started to look more seriously at making that a component of my business and thinking about how can I grow this and how can I really look at doing it at a high level, and honing the skill as a professional speaker.
Okay. So how long have you been a professional speaker then?
Going on 9 years.
9 years. Okay. So you had to like get over, it's almost like that imposter syndrome that we all go through, where you kind of start to reach this level of elevation where you have this level of achievement in certain people's minds, but you don't have like want to validate it. Is it like humility, or why is that imposter syndrome a thing so commonly?
There's a few different ways that I could go with this. We all have some amount of fears and doubts and insecurities in regards. I mean, it can manifest itself in a lot of different areas. And usually what's kind of the genesis of imposter syndrome is it's just we're looking at other people that we always, I guess, see the after picture of people, and we don't oftentimes see the before. So we compare sometimes our current struggles to other people's successes because they didn't see when maybe they were struggling through their first book and were trying to write their first word on their first page of their first book. And we look at it, and because, and I'll be honest with you, I think it's only going to get worse, because social media, say what you want about it, in a lot of ways is just a highlight reel of people's lives. And when we look at that, and when we are experiencing any amount of the feelings that are real, which are, you know what, I doubt myself a little bit from time to time. Like I'm worried about being found out, that maybe I'm not the expert that people claim that I am. What we're always doing is we're comparing ourselves against others. And we're comparing ourselves against, a lot of times, the highlight reel of other people's lives. And that is a freaking unwinnable game. Like we can't win that game. So I think that's a lot of where imposter syndrome starts. It is a very emotional thing. It's a lot of times not a logical thing. Of the coaching clients that I've worked with on this, and some of the own work that I've done, you've got to get out of the emotional part of your brain and get into the logical, and literally just start by writing down what are all the accomplishments that you've had, all the wins that you've had, all the good things that you've done. And usually what that does is, sort of like a lawyer would make a counter argument to, someone else's argument. That's basically what you're doing. When you start to list out some of these wins and accomplishments and things that you've done, you're making a logical counter argument to the BS emotional argument that is causing the imposter syndrome, if that makes sense. So that's just one simple strategy that people can use. Yeah.
So flipping that switch from emotional to logical, if you have some sort of practice, like, okay, let's list down these accomplishments, then you go through almost like this practice of forcing yourself to have that counter argument. That's really powerful if somebody executes on it.
And I think to also know that imposter syndrome is a real thing for people at all levels. I'm telling you, all the way up to professional baseball players, professional golfers, C-suite executives, billionaires. Like, I promise you, this is where the imposter syndrome, everybody looks at it, and sort of like the change that I was describing before, people almost like, they just want to come to a place where they never feel like that. And what they hope for is like, well, I hope that I never, ever am maybe doubting some of my own abilities and like questioning whether maybe I'm good enough. And I do think there's a balance there. But the bottom line is, some of the things that go with imposter syndrome actually drive you to continue to work hard, because you don't want to be, you don't want to become complacent. You don't want to think, I'm all that in a bag of tricks. Like, I just like, they
it's
actually
like the Dunning-Kruger effect. Are
you
familiar with that?
Yeah, they keep you moving forward. So I think to be able to find a balance in what's going on and to not let it paralyze you from taking action, I actually think is the biggest thing. Because a lot of times people, oh, I feel like an imposter, so I'm not going to take that action. Feeling like an imposter is normal, but what outperformers do is they continue to take actions despite some of those fears, insecurities, worries, self-doubts, etc.
They don't stop.
They don't stop.
So you've said outperformers now a few times. Let's dive into that a little bit. So, where'd you come up with that term? And then, like, what does it mean when you're saying it?
Well, my company's outperformed the norm. So like that's what I do when I speak, when I coach, when I consult, is I talk about the distinguishing characteristics between what outperformers do and what the norm does, or what maybe lesser performers or average performers do. So as far as where it started, I didn't actually have this. I think when I first started speaking, I came up with it probably 7-8 years ago, something like that. I came up with it at a coffee shop. I just remember like literally thinking about, I wonder what I want my company to be. And for whatever reason, it just, it was like the ringing epiphany voice from God or something that was like, outperform the norm. And I said it a couple of times and I said, I think I can go with that. Like, I'm going to hang my shingle on that one. So that's how it came to be.
I mean, the norm is a baseline that a lot of people go by, and they're okay with just being like right in there with the pack. But being able to separate yourself from the pack is that differentiator, and people that really excel. And in the practice of doing that consistently over time, as everything within your life changes and evolves, and still doing it, that's what makes people great and like become legends in their own industries.
Well, and I think this is an important point of clarification, because when I'm talking about outperformers or the norm, what I really try to get people to lean into is looking at it in terms of mastery and not just ego. The ego part of it is kind of what I was saying before, where we're looking at social media, highlight reel of people's lives. I'm comparing myself to this person that is this business and this car and this house and has done these things. It's just an unwinnable game long term. Like, I always go back to the Teddy Roosevelt quote that comparison is the thief of joy. And I really truly believe that. So I think it's, to a degree, I think it's okay to look out at others, and we all do it. And to think about maybe how can I gain a competitive advantage, or what are some things that I can do. But the mastery part of whether we're talking about personally, professionally, athletically, or anything else, how can I actually lean into and continue to show up each and every day as the best version of me and put that out on the field of play? Usually, if you can consistently do that, you gain whatever competitive advantage you may have wanted when you were doing the comparison in the first place. So that's, I always like to, I want to make sure that people understand where I'm coming from when I'm talking about outperforming the norm, because I'm guessing for people that are listening to this, if they're willing to listen to a podcast on me talking about sports psychology and talking about how you can grow business and things like that, chances are you're already above whatever societal norm we might be talking about anyway. So let's really lean into how do we just seek mastery and seek showing up as the best version of us.
And like just working on your craft, because that doesn't end. And even if it ends in one area, especially with sports, like as a college athlete, that ended at some point, and that, like, the psychology behind that, like, it impacted me in a lot of ways that I didn't even realize, because it was so like emotional.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is one of the things I talk to people about as well. Is I think, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Simon Sinek, like the infinite game. Do you know what I mean when I say that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So for maybe listeners that aren't familiar with it, you might know Simon Sinek because he's one of the big thought leaders out there. His Start With Why TED Talk is one of the most watched TED Talks of all time. but I think his latest book was called The Infinite Game. And baseball or sports, if we're talking about it, is a finite game. Like there's a finite set of rules. There's a time when it's going to end. There's a winner and there's a loser. Like, and a lot of what we do here in life, it's a game of who are we really competing against? Like, who are you really competing against? And I think to your point of what you said before, like you're really competing with yourself at the end of the day, and you're playing this infinite game. And whether you hit or missed your numbers for this month or this quarter or this year, well, does it matter? Yeah, I mean, I guess to a degree, but ultimately, if you lean into the fact that we're playing an infinite game that is different than the 4 years of maybe playing college baseball, like it's a game that continues to go. And if you actually approach it through that mindset of growth and continuous improvement, you're going to win that infinite game in the long run, instead of just thinking about how can I get like the next short-term carrot
The
and
dopamine
like
hit, yeah.
continue to do these things, sometimes at the expense of what might actually be best for us or our business or our clients and customers long term. It's just a better way to look at it.
And being happy through that whole process too, like, because like putting that effort in, I know I myself, as I was going through it, I'd play a full baseball season and be miserable because even no matter what my performance was, I wanted it to be like a little bit better. And then at certain points I was like playing really uptight, and then it was causing issues, and it like spiraled. And I know that happens to people in business as well. So like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so what you're describing, I bet if we were to really unpack this, what causes that pressure and that stress, that anxiety, is typically focusing on what might happen instead of what you're doing. And I think that's a really key insight, because the same way that a baseball player can't perform well if they're thinking about, I need to go out there and I need to pitch a no-hitter, I need to pitch a shutout, or I need to go 4 for 4 at the plate, we need to win this game. The same way that they can't perform their best if all they're focusing is on outcomes, a business leader or an entrepreneur can't perform their best either if they're just solely focused on the outcomes that they want to produce. Because usually what is left with that is an absence of focusing on what I am doing, the stuff that I can actually control, the activities, the actions, the behaviors, the tasks, etc., and really doing that intentionally and with purpose. And when you do that, it's just a more empowering way to go about your day-to-day life. To your point of what you said before, you're more fulfilled and happy when you're actually doing it. And again, if you invest yourself in those activities and actions, assuming you've chosen the right ones, the ones that actually move the needle and make you productive, you will more than likely achieve those outcomes that you want at the end of the game, at the end of the month, quarter, year, etc.
So how much does having like a clearly defined like why play into being able to do that, to just to like be present with the process rather than the outcome?
Yeah, I don't know exactly where I stand on the why part of it, and you can clarify for me if you meant something different.
I just mean like a purpose, like some type of passion behind the efforts and energy you're putting in. Like as an entrepreneur, like you can make money doing anything.
Sure.
So somebody just starting up, if they don't have a like driving force behind them, sometimes.
So I get what you mean. I wasn't sure if you were talking about in terms of kind of a mission and an everyday purpose, or a vision as far as what you're working towards. I think it's important to have both, to have something that you're aspiring to, as well as something that, hey, this is why what I'm working towards is actually meaningful and deeply valuable to me. I do think both of those are really important things. I think they can help make you more fulfilled and happy while you're doing it, and also probably empower you to work harder, especially when times are tough. But what I will also say to the people that are listening is sometimes, again, I see people get in this comparison game a little bit where maybe they saw something on a TED Talk, or they saw something on a video or a podcast or social media, etc. And someone was just talking about their unbelievably powerful purpose that just drives them every day. And what happens is if someone doesn't have a purpose like that, they feel like there's something wrong with them. And they just sit there searching for it, like, well, maybe I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing because I'm not as on fire as this person, whether they're actually on fire or not. You might have just seen like a snippet of a longer clip, and you don't see that person in their everyday kind of day-to-day lives. But that comparison part of like, well, I guess I should have a stronger purpose. And you sit there looking for it, and instead of, no, like it's okay to just have a good purpose or a good vision, good mission, instead of it has to be something that literally catapults me out of bed every single morning and just propels me into action. Because I don't think that's reality, to be honest with you, probably for anyone. So
yeah,
that's just
I think that's really good insight there. So just like going out and then continually being excellent is really what it's all about. So when you're coming in and you're doing your keynotes, or you're speaking to a group or a business, do you have these presentations like put together ahead of time, or do you really think through and craft it for the specific audience and where they're at?
Usually 80% of it is probably already crafted. And then the last 20%, the nuances of the title or the role of the person that I'm speaking to, or the organization, the team, the company, the industry, etc. That's kind of the last 20% that I'll fine tune the edges on things.
Just so it
also
connects.
Sometimes like they might have a theme for the event, or they might have, you know, company initiatives or something that they're specifically working towards that year. So those are the things that I always weave into what it is that I'm doing, so people feel like, wow, this was really a customized presentation for me, or for, you know, for this company, organization, team, kind of, etc. It's not just a stock presentation, but a lot of the concepts that I talk about are relatively consistent, no matter who I'm speaking to.
That makes sense. So you're really going around and you're changing lives every day, right? Like as long as that person on the other side is like engaging with it.
Well, I mean, I'd like to think that we're all changing lives every day, right? Micro and macro. I mean, you're changing lives with this podcast. So
kind words.
yeah, I mean, I hope that I'm changing lives, and all you can do is control what you can control, right? Like the same way that you can't put together
all the time.
Yeah. The same way that you can't put together a podcast and just think about like, okay, I need to have this number of listeners or subscribers, and all of them have to be completely happy and on fire with every single episode that I put out. Like the same way that you can't do that, I can't go into things trying to control what I can't control, which is what is someone else's interpretation going to be of what it is that I'm saying. Like I can't force that on someone, because everybody comes to my speaking engagements at different times and places kind of in their life. So that doesn't keep me from always continually trying to refine my messaging and think about how can I make these points impactful and really make them hit home. But whether you leave and think that, oh my God, Scott Welly was the most unbelievable speaker I've ever heard in my life, or you think about, oh yeah, I mean, he was good, but there were some things that I didn't necessarily jive with. That's not really for me to say, and I can't carry that weight with me when I'm going in to speak. All I can do is try to do the best that I can do and hope it resonates with as many people as possible.
Yeah, I mean, even if there's just one thing that people can take away, that brings value, but I'm sure that there's a lot more behind it with everything that you have. So I want to be respectful of your time. We're going on an hour now. So we've got a question we ask everybody that we bring on here. So Homegrown Hustle is the name of the podcast, but hustle is one word for me. That through sports, it has really just stayed with me into business. If you had to define the word hustle in business, what does that mean to you?
Continuing to go after what you want, regardless of any obstacles, barriers, distractions, things that stand in your way.
I love that. Thank you. So for any listeners that want to reach out to you or get in contact with you to have you come and speak, where can they get in contact with you?
Go to my website, scottwelle.com. That's SCOTTWELLE. There's, plenty of information about speaking and some of the programs and links to my books and things like that. But I'd also encourage people, if what I said today resonated and jived with you at all, I have a ton of free resources available on that site for sales, for leadership, for goal achievement, for peak performance. It's all just there. If you would like, you can also join my weekly Outperform weekly newsletter list. But regardless of whether you're a person that will ever bring me in to speak or work with me through coaching or anything else, like there's plenty of resources out there that I've kind of created and tweaked and tinkered with in my 15 plus years studying peak performance that I think would help a lot of people out there. So again, scottwelle.com.
scottwelle.com. Well, Scott, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you coming on the Homegrown Hustle. I'm really looking forward to learning more about you. I'm going to look further into some of your books and look at some of that content on your website. So thanks again, Scott. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thanks again for joining us on Homegrown Hustle. Our local business community thrives because of the brilliant leaders right here in our backyard. And it's been an absolute privilege to provide them with a platform to share their invaluable expertise. Stay tuned for more insight, wisdom, and inspiration from our local business champions. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Together, we'll continue to nurture and expand our homegrown success stories. Matt Eichmann signing off until our next insightful episode.